In the darker shadows, in the white cold, fearlessly we search for knowledge new and old. We drink the strong spirits and read ancient tomes, the order of the Abracast. We are the brave and bold.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.
Stigmata Studios presents The Jinn Jihad. The Jinn Jihad kicks your face with myths, mysteries, epic battles, suicide bombers, quirky characters, and divine power armor. In this epic graphic novel, the warrior archangels descend on a city in chaos. It's all-out war. The non-standard assembly battles an ancient terrorist organization, and their ultimate weapon, a corrupted, magically enhanced, unstoppable monster, the Jinn. This graphic novel is a wild ride. It's one part distant Arab myth, one part Old Testament angelic vengeance, and one part unique heroic tough guys. Available on Amazon. Get more info on the Jinn Jihad and other titles at stigmatastudios.com.
Harpocrates among the Greek writers. He was compared with Apollo and identified with Horus, the Egyptian god of the sun. The youngest son of Osiris and Isis, both were represented as youth and with the same attributes and symbols. He was believed to have been born with his finger in his mouth as indicative of the secrecy and mystery. The Greeks and Romans worshipped him as a god of quiet life, repose, and secrecy. He is described by Plutarch as lame in the lower limbs when born, to indicate the weak and tender shootings of corn. He also symbolizes the sun. When in its early and feeble conditions, he is sometimes represented in sculpture as a child, wearing the skull cap or crown of the upper and lower world, and holding in his hands the whip and crook to expel evil influences. He is also represented mounted upon a ram which carries a ball upon its head. His left hand is armed with a club, while he presses the two forefingers of his right hand upon his lips as the symbol of silence, and intimates that the mysteries of religion and philosophy ought never be revealed to the profane or uninitiated. Being armed with the club identifies him as the Heracles of the Egyptians. That was from Macoy's Dictionary of Freemasonry under the Harpocrates. So let's get it on. What are we going to do, everybody? Are you ready? Yeah, I'm ready. Are you ready? Yeah, you know I'm ready. All right, let's get it on.
The Abracast, occult, history, conspiracy, violence.
I'm your home slice, John. This episode's called Harpocrates Rising and the 47th Problem of Euclid. So before we get started, I just want to say that last week when last episode, whenever that I stumbled on to this Harpocrates character in the Freemasonry dictionary, I was not ready at all to read his entry, and I called him Harpocrates. And I know, like, I didn't re-listen to the show, but I was driving around the other day, and I'm like, Harpocrates. What a maroon. The problem is that since, I don't know if it's just because I said it or because I beat myself up over it so hard, now I have to say his name like 100 times in this episode, and I'm probably pretty sure I'm going to fuck it up and call him Harpocrates, because I get on a roll, you know. I get going like I'm speaking tongues in a tent somewhere in Appalachia, and sometimes I lose track, and I don't think everything all the way through. So I'm probably pretty sure, and I want to apologize in advance if I let out a Harpocrates. Dude, I'm just trying to be excellent. So that's the forewarning. But I do know now for sure that his name is Harpocrates, but I still might fire from the hip and lose it. So welcome back to Freemasonry February. Again, I was planning on getting into the Entered Apprentice initiation this week, but I'm still hung up. On this goat riding thing, but I'm coming at it from a little bit different standpoint. Last week, it was all about free Masonic goat riders, and this week it isn't much about the goat, but it is about who is riding it. So, like I mentioned, we identified a goat rider in the Masonic dictionary, a young chap by the name of Harpocrates, and with a little math and some ancient Egyptology, I think we're going to shed some light on this and where he might actually kind of fall into place when we're talking about Masons and why their initiation ritual is so tied to riding this guy. I think we pretty much debunked that last week, this Masons riding goats, but there is just this little nugget of why this goat rider Harpocrates he's in my brain now, you know, because I already know what this episode is going to say. But he's like intrinsically locked into the idea of these initiation rituals, even though I don't think that, you know, every Mason gets a blindfold and his tow cable and he gets put in his pajamas and rides a robot goat around. I don't think that's what happens, but I dug in and I found like this little nugget of like this little baby goat rider that I'm just fascinated by. And ironically, I found some math problems that tie this whole thing together. So that's what we're going to get into. And I don't say this very often, but if you can at all be around your phone or your computer to Google search, because I'm going to mention when we get into this math thing, I am going to mention it, and I'm not very mathematically inclined, as we're going to talk about. And there's a graphic that goes with this. So if you want to follow along with the math stuff, and please do, and check me before I wreck me. Please do. But if not, I'm going to try to get through that part as fast as possible and as painlessly as possible. But it is part of the crux of this episode. That's why it's in the title, the 47th Problem of Euclid. So again, this is episode 87, Harpocrates Rising and the 47th Problem of Euclid. It's going to be coming at your face right after this. So if you... We're looking right now at something that's called the 47th Problem of Euclid. It's also called the 47th Proposition of Euclid or the Pythagorean Theorem. It is represented by what appears to be 3 squares in a diagram, roughly touching edges. The diagram or most used representation of this problem or whatever, this theorem, looks like a Bic lighter. If you just look at a silhouette of a Bic lighter, you flip the lid up. So if there's like too many lids and one flipped up one way and a smaller one flipped up the other way, you know how those little lids flip up. You know what I'm talking about. And it looks like a lid on each side, and the lids are like touching their edges, and there's like a triangle in the middle of them. Do you know what I'm saying? Do you know what I mean? This is why I said if you could reach a Google image, like this would be a great place to do so. So, full disclosures, I am not a math guy at all. It's my worst subject. So, the 47th Problem of Euclid is somewhat of a mystery to me. But the Masonics use it as a symbol, and most wonder at its significance of this strange-looking collection of 3 box thingies are all about. I'm going to read this from a website. It's called Freemason-Freemasonry.com. It's an article or section, whatever, called Euclid Unveiled. So we're going to read a little bit from this tonight. I'm going to read this first part here, and the type is real tiny, so I'm going to have to forgive me for a little letting you in on... I should have some cheaters on for this. The 47th Problem of Euclid is indeed enigmatic. While it is unostensibly a proof of a key principle of geometry, its esoteric characteristics, not its mathematical properties, are the source of its Masonic significance. Unraveling the complex riddle of the 47th problem and understanding why it is regarded as a central tenet of Freemasonry properly begins with the study of its history and its mathematical application. The ritual during which the 47th Problem of Euclid is introduced briefly addresses these issues. However, having touched fleetingly upon the fundamentals, ritual goes no further, and it is left to the candidates to undertake further exploration, or not. The puzzling brevity in which the 47th problem is discussed, given the accompanying emphasis placed on its importance to the craft, seems almost to be an invitation for the intellectual curious to explore further. Most candidates, however, seem to assume that their acquaintance with the 47th problem gained during their early years of formal education provides them with a more than adequate knowledge of the 47th Problem of Euclid, and that they have already satisfactorily mastered the concept. Few ever investigate any further. Then it goes on to show a geometric doodle of what I was trying to talk about. The progress beyond the fundamental concept and arrive at the door of understanding, preparatory study of history and the mathematics of the 47th problem is indeed essential, but ultimately one must discern that the true Masonic importance of the 47th problem lies not within its mathematical utility, which is considerable, but in the fact that the 47th problem, as put forth by Euclid, is intended to apply a very specific case of a right triangle having the sides and lengths in specific proportions of 3, 4, and 5. This paper is intended to serve as a bridge to an improved understanding of the Masonic meaning of the 47th problem of Euclid. Consequently, it will include a very brief discussion of what is known about its history and its brief discussion of its mathematical blah, blah, blah. We're not going to get into much of that. So what are these 3 black boxes, and why are they so important to Freemasons? Now, I put black boxes because that's the drawing or symbol that I was looking at. However, they could be 3 whatever boxes. They could be different sized Rubik's cubes, whatever. We are told that Euclid, the father of geometry, who lived several hundred years after Pythagoras, worked long and hard to solve the 3-4-5 ratio puzzle. However, historically, it is believed that the Egyptians that the Egyptians understood the mathematical usefulness of the 3-4-5 ratio long before even Euclid. The math is the key to understanding, and the symbol's broader and universal meaning. So we're going to get into this. This is going to sound probably a little like a SAT math problem. We're going to get into it right now. After this, the Pythagorean theorem, also known as the 47th Problem of Euclid, or 3-4-5. Right after this. Okay, so I'm going to do what the fuck did I do? I'm going to do a quick, just check in with this brief history bit. Freemasons-freemasonry.com, Euclid unveiled. There's tons of information on here, actually, if you guys are more interested in this. Pythagoras was an adept of the Babylonian, Eleusinian, Greek, Egyptian, and Indian mystery schools. The attitudes and beliefs of Pythagorean sect, which he founded, doubtless reflected those traditions, and it's crucial to know that during the latter part of the 17th century AD, a major European revival of Pythagoras and other Gnostic philosophy took place. This time period corresponds to the period during which Freemasonry was emerging. So the things that jump out at me is the word Gnostic, because I love it. And also this Greek and Egyptian connection of Pythagoras. So Pythagoras, there was a time when he kind of went he went hiking, like he went everywhere. One of the places he wound up was in Egypt, where he's like, looking at all this stuff, and these Egyptian, we'll call them mages, these Egyptian mages kind of told him what was up with this 3-4-5 ratio. And that is this. Any right triangle, the sum of the squares of the two sides is equal to the square of the hypotenuse. The hypotenuse of a right triangle, which is the longest leg, or the 5 side of the 3-4-5 ratio. The right triangle shows the sides 3, 4, and 5, and the angle created between 3, one side, 4, the other side, and the right angle of the square. Remember the Egyptian connection, numerology. In Egyptian mythology, certain numbers were considered sacred, holy, or magical by the ancient Egyptians, particularly 2, 3, 4, and 7, and their multiples and sums. There are multiple examples of these numbers turning up in Egyptian mythology, especially 3 as a symbol for plurality, and 5 and 7 as a symbol of perfection or completeness. So the square, now this hypotenuse business, hold on for 1 second. I just have to skip ahead to see where I put this. All right, so this hypotenuse business, this 3-4-5 ratio. This is what Deadshot was trying to teach his daughter in Suicide Squad. If you remember, he's explaining the different sides and what the hypotenuse is. You don't believe me? Go check it out. Remember, I already said that. So the square of 3 is 9. The square of 4 is 16. The sum of 9 and 16 is 25, and 25 represents the hypotenuse. The square root of 25 is 5. Therefore, the ratio is written 3, 4, 5. When we write down the square of the first 4 numbers, 1, 4, 9, and 16, we see that by subtracting each square from the next one, we get 3, 5, and 7. Remember in Egyptian mythology, especially, that numbers 3, 5, and 7 were important. Okay, so let's try it. We're starting off by 1, 4, 9, and 16. Does everyone have their pencils? Everybody have their pencils? It better be very sharp, a number 2. So 1, 4, 9, and 16 are our numbers. And what we're going to do is we're going to subtract each square from the next one. So if we're starting with 1, 4, 9, 16, we're going to do 4 minus 1. Get it? That leaves 3. 9 minus 4. That leaves 5. 16 minus 9. That leaves 7. So we're left with 3, 5, and 7. So these are the steps in Masonry. There are these steps in the we're going to get into when we finally get into doing these initiation rituals or these ceremonies. When we're doing the fellow craft, which is the second degree. Yes, that's right. When we're going to do the fellow craft, which is the second degree, we're going to be talking about this winding stairs that lead to this middle chamber. So whenever you hear the middle chamber, what you're talking about is the second degree of Masonry. It's the middle chamber. And these are also the number of brethren which we need in order to form Master Mason. Or to form, okay, these numbers 3, 5, and 7, they are there's 3 steps, 5 steps, and 7 steps in this winding stair that leads to the middle chamber. I'm sorry, I had like a brain malfunction here, but they're also the numbers of the different degrees of Masonry that are necessary to open a lodge. So in order to open a lodge, you need 3 Master Masons. You need 5 fellow craft Masons, which is the middle. That's the second chamber. That's the second degree, or middle chamber, second degree. And 7 entered apprentices. So these are those sacred numbers that we were just talking about. The essence of the 47th problem of Euclid is about the importance of establishing the architecturally true or correct foundation based on the use of this square. I'm going to skip along a little bit in this Euclid Unveiled paper where he's talking about what these numbers mean to the lodge. If we examine the prescription for the dimensions of a lodge room as given by Mackay's Masonic Encyclopedia, we find that the lodge should be an oblong square. We find further reference to the oblong square in the Masonic ritual having dimensions such that it is 1/3 longer than it is wide. In other words, 3 times 4 rectangle. It is just, I'm not sure exactly how to read that in mathematical terms. 3 times 4 rectangle seems right to me. Just as like the one we obtain in our figure by the proof by projecting the sides having lengths of 3 and 4 to pronounce a new rectangle. The uncanny link to the 3, 4, 5 triangle in our lodge room becomes, as they say, more and more mysterious when we consider that during circumambulation of the lodge, circumambulation means when they're conducting the initiate through how they do, like how the course, the path in which they walk to the different stations of the lodge while they're doing these rituals. That's what circumambulation means. When we consider that during circumambulation of the lodge in some Masonic jurisdictions, the EA circumambulates 3 times, the FC 4 times, and the Master Mason 5 times. Circumambulation, by the way, involves making a complete circuit around the lodge while keeping the right hand towards the altar. Circumambulation is also called squaring the lodge. And the number of circumambulations is counted based upon the number of times in which the northeast corner is reached. With the completion of one circumambulation, the candidate has traveled twice the distance of 4, the length of the lodge from from west to east and east to west, and twice the distance of 3, the length of the lodge from north to south and south to north. The sum to a total distance of 4 plus 3 plus 4 plus 3 equals 14, and 14 reduced is 1 plus 4, and that equals 5, which is the length of the diagonal distance across the lodge. Therefore, the Mason raised in this manner has reproduced by circumambulation the numbers 3, 4, and 5 in the most significant corner of the lodge, the northeast. When a candidate kneels at the altar while binding himself to his obligation, which we'll get into all this when we get into these ceremonies, he kneels at the center of the diagonal and placed representing birth. It might also be considered that the oblong square, which is 2, 3, 4, 5 triangles sharing a common diagonal, may express a reflective relationship between the celestial and the earthly, such as the embodiment in the Hermetic philosophy that the earthly plane is a reflection of the divine. Or, what do we call that, guys? We've been here. We know. The as above, so below. That which is above is that which is below. And that which is below is like that which is above. From the Corpus Hermeticum of Hermes Trismegistus. Did such a great job. The essence of the 4-7 problem. Blah blah. We'll skip through that. So there, we go back to talking about a little bit about the not so esoteric kind of thing is this, and we talk about the simple geometric 3-4-5 ratio. What you can do with it. You can create a 90-degree right angle. A man can reach out into space and measure the distance of the stars in light years. He can survey the land, mark off boundaries, and construct every single thing on Earth. He can build homes, churches, and buildings, and with the knowledge of this simple ratio, he can begin digging on opposite sides of a mountain and dig a straight tunnel through its center of it that meets exactly at the center. He can navigate the oceans and be able to locate himself in the middle of the water with no land in sight. And he's able to calculate how far he has come and how much farther he must go. The 47th Problem of Euclid represents a perfect symbol of Freemasonry, encompassing both art and science, and that simple knowledge of its demands a breathtaking awe to which he may only bow our heads in reference to the perfection of the universality of the infinite wisdom of that which has been given to us by God. So if you Google this symbol or something and take another look at this Masonic symbol for the 47th Problem of Euclid above, you'll see that the square on the top left measures 3 units. The square on its side, the square on the top measures 4 units on each of its sides, and the bottom square measures 5 units on each of its sides. So now you can see the right triangle, which is the white space in the middle, which is surrounded by these boxes. So we're going to move on here. We're about halfway through. Here we go. So we're going to head back to this Egyptian mythology thing. Because you're probably sitting here like, okay, great. Thanks for all the story problems, Professor Towers. But what does any of this mean? What does any of this have to do with Harpocrates? Yeah. Just hold on to your britches, everybody. I'm going to get to it. So, I'm going to get to it. Just hold on. Back to this Egyptian mythology thing, the triangles and this 3-4-5 ratio, and ultimately back to Harpocrates. But first, we have to talk briefly about the Osiris myth. Osiris, Isis, and Horus. So I'm going to read from you from EgyptianMyths.net. I'm going to read from you a portion of the Isis and Osiris story. I need for you just to keep in the back of your mind. Don't forget about this big math thing with the big lighters and the triangle and all that stuff. We're gonna get right back to that. I just have to talk. I'm gonna briefly tell this story, but I want you to keep in mind that triangle in the middle and the different size blocks that make up that square of the 47th problem of Euclid. Because what we're gonna do is we're gonna tie it into. We're going to tie it into it's the Egyptian Trinity, pre-Christian Egyptian Trinity. Okay, so I know it sounds wild. Just hang on. Let's see. We're going to just jump right in the middle of this here. On the first of these days, Osiris, the eldest son of Nuit, was born, and on the second day it was set aside to be his birthday. Hold on. Okay, I'm going to skip a little bit farther down. When Osiris was born, many signs and wonders were seen and heard throughout the world. Most notable was the voice which came from the holiest shrine in the Temple of Thebes on the Nile, which today is called Karnak, speaking to a man called Pyles, bidding him to proclaim to all men that Osiris, the good and mighty king, was born, and to bring joy to all the earth. Pyles did as he was bidden, and he also attended on the divine child and brought him up as a man among men. When Osiris was grown up, he married his sister, Isis. You see this kind of stuff all over the place now in Pornhub, but let's just get focused right back. Hold on. When Osiris was a grown man, he married his sister, Isis, a custom which the pharaohs of Egypt followed ever after. And Seth married Nephthys, for he, too, being a god, could marry only a goddess. After Isis, by her craft, had learned the secret name of Ra, or Re, Osiris became the sole ruler of Egypt and reigned on earth as Re had done, and he found the people both savage and brutish, fighting amongst themselves and killing and eating one another. But Isis discovered the grain of both wheat and barley. You know what you could do with barley. We're going to get some brew up in here, some Hebrew, which grew wild all over the land, and other plants, and it was still unknown to men. And Osiris taught them how to plant the seeds when the Nile had risen in the yearly undulation, and sank again, leaving fresh fertile mud all over the fields. How to tend and water the crops, and how to cut the corn when it was ripe, and how to thresh the grain on the threshing floors, dry it, grind it to flour, and make it into bread. He showed them also how to plant vines and to make grapes into wine. Oh, yeah, dog. And they knew already how to brew beer out of the barley. When the people of Egypt had learned how to make bread and cut only the flesh of such animals as he taught them were suitable, Osiris went on to teach them the laws. and how to live peacefully, happily together, delighting themselves in music and poetry. And soon, as Egypt was filled with peace and plenty, Osiris set out over the world to bring his blessings upon other nations. While he was away, he left Isis to rule over the land, in which she did both wisely and well. But, dun dun dun, Seth, the evil one, their brother, envied Osiris and hated Isis. The more the people loved and praised Osiris, the more Seth hated him. And the more good he did, the happier mankind became, the stronger grew Seth's desire to kill his brother and rule in his place. Isis, however, was so full of wisdom and so watchful that Seth made no attempt to seize the throne while she was watching over the land of Egypt. And when Osiris returned from his travels, Seth was among the first to welcome him back and kneel in reverence before the good god Pharaoh Osiris. Yet he made his plans, aided by 72 of his wicked friends, and also the evil queen of Ethiopia. Secretly, Seth attained the exact measurements of the body of Osiris and caused a beautiful chest to be made that it would fit only him, and was fashioned to the rarest and most costly wood, cedar brought from Lebanon, and ebony from Punt, and the southeast of the Red Sea, for no wood grows in Egypt except for the soft and useless palm. Seth gave a great feast in honor of Osiris and the other guests, who were 72 conspirators. It was the greatest feast that had yet been seen in Egypt, and the foods were choicier, and the wines were stronger, and the dancing girls more beautiful than ever before. Remember, I'm going to get this put on a t-shirt, guys. It's Earth Girls. It's always the Earth Girls. When the heart of Osiris had been made glad with the feasting and song, the chest was brought in, and all were amazed at its beauty. Osiris marveled at the rare cedar inlaid with ebony and ivory, with less rare gold and silver, and painted inside with figures of gods and birds and animals, and he desired it greatly. He was like, come on, bro, let me get that chest. I will give this chest to whoever fits it most exactly, cried Set. And at once the conspirators began to turn to see if they could win. But at one was too tall, another was too short. This is the Goldilocks problem. And one was too fat and the other was too thin. They all tried in vain. Let me see if I will fit into this marvelous piece of work, said Osiris. And he laid himself down in the chest while it gathered around breathlessly. I fit exactly. The chest is mine, cried Osiris. And the chest is mine. It is yours indeed, and shall be so forever, hissed Set, as he banged down the lid in a desperate haste. He and the conspirators nailed it shut and sealed every crack with molten lead, so that Osiris, the man, died inside the chest, and his spirit went west across the Nile into Duat, the place of testing. This is where there's the balances. You have to balance your soul against a feather. And if your soul's heavier than a feather, a giant fucking alligator eats you. That's not in the story, I just know that. But beyond it to Amenti, where those live forever and who have lived well on the earth, and passed this judgment of Duat. He could not pass as yet. Seth and his companions took the chest which held the body of Osiris and cast it into the Nile. And happy, the Nile god carried it out to the great green sea, where it was tossed for many days until it came upon the shores of Phoenicia, near the city of Byblos. Here, the waves cast it into the tamarisk tree and threw it on the shore, and the tree shot out at branches and grew leaves and flowers to make a fit resting place for the body of the good god Osiris. And very soon that tree became famous throughout the land. Presently, King Malakander heard of it, and he and his wife Esther came to the seashore to gaze by the tree, and it had now branches had grown together and hidden the chest which held the body of Osiris in the trunk itself. Malakander gave orders that the tree should be cut down and fashioned into a great pillar for his palace. This was done, and all wondered at its beauty and fragrance, but none knew that it held the body of God. Meanwhile, in Egypt, Isis went on a great fear. Isis was in great fear. She had always known that Seth was filled with evil and jealousy, but the kindly Osiris would not believe his brother's wickedness. But Isis soon knew that her husband was dead, and even though that no one had told her, and she had fled to the marshes in the delta. All right, so I'm just going to shorten this down. I don't know if this is a this is a different version. Okay, so what happens is eventually Osiris gets cut into a bunch of different pieces, and his dick gets cut off, and it gets thrown into the river where a fish or something eats it. So Isis was able to find the body and piece it all together, except for this missing dick. And she was like, what? This is crazy. So she builds a golden phallus. This is where obelisk comes from. This is why when you look at Washington D.C. and you look at like a satellite or a bird's eye view of the Washington Monument, you look down and it's this obelisk, which is great. We can argue all day whether it's a phallic symbol or not, but it's placed in the middle of two conjoining circles, creating a Vivica Pisces right in the middle. So if you look at it and the pattern that's on the ground, it's hard to argue at that point that it's a phallic symbol, because it's all about fucking right there. Boom. So this is what Isis does. She builds a golden cock, and she fucks it. Again, we're back at Pornhub all of a sudden. So she gets pregnant and has a baby named Horus, and Horus is the sun god, the Egyptian sun god. So I want you to keep that triangle in mind. I want you to keep it in mind that the middle of that Bic lighter part and the triangle is actually this 47th problem of Euclid, is actually a graphic symbol, a symbolic expression of this pre-Christian Egyptian trinity, with Osiris as the 3, like the phallic symbol standing straight up, Isis as the 4, which is, you have to rotate. It depends on who drew this graphic, right? But the way that I'm describing it is you have to do, the 3 block has to be to the leftmost side. The 4 block has to be at the bottom of the screen or the page or whatever. And then the 5 block is Horus, which is the hypotenuse. Am I saying that these Freemasons are running around worshiping Horus? No, not really. I don't think I really am saying that. But this 345 and this 47th problem of Euclid is encoded in their stuff. I'm going to go back to this Euclid Unveiled article. I'm kind of skipping around in it, but I'm going to skip around to this part right here. Actually, I'm going to take a break. I'm going to rest my jaw here for a second. Lube it up, Okay, here we go. The 47th problem of Euclid is not only a mathematical tool, but it is also a symbol. In fact, the mathematical utility of the 47th problem often, and I believe intentionally, not me, that's in the article, quote, or parenthesis, and I believe intentionally, unparenthesis, veils the symbolic meaning, providing a sort of smokescreen intended to conceal that which is intended to be understood only by those willing to seek the underlying message. Let those with eyes see and those with ears hear. I believe that there are two separate principles or messages which are revealed by the 47th problem of Euclid. Both, however, are tied to the fact that the 47th problem of Euclid, unlike the Pythagorean theorem, uses a very specific case of a right triangle as base. This special case is what employs the right triangle, which has its sides in the exact proportion of 3, 4, 5. I guess maybe that's what he's talking about. When I say it depends on what side you're looking at, like you've got to twist, the Pythagorean theorem to make the 4 side the bottom. Maybe that's what he's talking about there. Like, this is not my strong suit, dudes. Give me talking about Egyptian mythology. That's where I'm at. I would like to begin with the first veiled message, which incorporates ancient principles of the divine trinity represented by the masculine, feminine, and offspring. This concept is ancient in origin and was spoken of by Plato circa 348 BC in Book 8, Chapter 3 of the Republic, in which he advances a description of the so-called nuptial figure, which is a triangle having the sides in proportions 3, 4, and 5. Plato describes this perpendicular side as 3, the base side as 4, and the hypotenuse as 5. This is exactly what I just said. He further states that the square of 5 is the sum of the squares of 3 and 4. The description given by Plato of the nuptial figure indicates that he was familiar with the Pythagorean formula. Plutarch, 46 AD, in later commentary refers to Plato's nuptial figure, and he adds that based on Plato's description that that the perpendicular represents the male, the base the female, and the hypotenuse the offspring. This interpretation is founded upon the fact that the Pythagoreans and ancient Hebrews considered that the 3 is the first odd. Remember the Egyptian numerology and mythology? It's the plurality, and therefore male number, and is the square of 2, the first even and therefore female number, and that 5 is the offspring of the 2, 3 plus 2. Early Egyptian mystery schools considered this linked to Isis, Osiris, and Horus. There we go. Finally! Isis, Osiris, and Horus. And we're going to get on to linking... Okay, hold on. I'll get to it when I get to it. We, as modern Masons, generally... Just remember, this is all linked to Isis, Osiris, and Horus. I just told you the Isis, Osiris, and Horus story. Isis is 4, Osiris is 3, Horus is 5, or the hypotenuse. We are modern Masons generally consider that the concept expresses the masculine and feminine characteristics of GAOTU, which means... what is... a grand architect of the universe, merged in the offspring of the 2. As previously described, numerology played an important role in the symbolic representation of the Pythagoreans, and this practice carries over to Freemasonry. As an example, the number 3 is prominent in Masonic ritual, as it is in the natural world. in Masonry, there are 3 degrees: 3 principal officers, 3 original grandmasters, 3 lesser lights, 3 great lights, 3 movable jewels, 3 immovable jewels, 3 of 15 who traveled in a westernly direction, 3 wraps, 3 gates, 3 steps on the master's carpet, 3 steps in Freemasonry, 3 supporting pillars. There are similar manifestations of the number 3 throughout nature, as we will discover. In the case of the 47th problem of Euclid, the number 3 is extremely important and symbolic in its meaning. Okay, so I'm tying this 47th problem of Euclid to Osiris, Isis, and Horus, back to ancient Egyptology. So check this out. Albert Pike, in his famed Masonic book called Morals and Dogma, explained this proto-Christ mythic code. Quote, the sun and moon represent the 2 grand principles, the male and the female. Both shed their light upon their offspring, the blazing star, Horus, unquote. So that's what basically the last passage I read in this Euclid Unveiled paper on Freemasons-Freemasonry.com also said. So now all I got to do, I'm running out of time, but I just have to link Harpocrates to Horus. I don't think I fucked it up yet, guys. I'm so happy. I'm not done, but I don't think I fucked it up yet. In ancient Greece, the figure of young Horus, as opposed to Horus or the Kemwer, or Horus the Elder, or Hiru Ura. The Horus the Younger became Huru Pakered, or Harpocrates. So remember in the cold open when I was reading the Masonic dictionary, and Harpocrates was associated with Apollo, and then also Isis and Osiris as a younger Horus. He is the sun god, and when he rises or he comes around giving the they call it the OTO, the Ordo Templi Orientis, and Golden Dawn, Aleister Crowley, those guys would call it the sign of Harpocrates, which is the shush sign. Remember in the first prophecy when Christopher Walken said, when you were a infant, I put my finger on your lips and went, shah! And that's where you get the little indent under your nose. That's what this Harpocrates, the sign of Harpocrates, is, and that was in the definition as well. He came out with his 2 fingers holding his lips closed as a sign of secrecy and initiation. So I guess that's it, man. I'm spent. So last episode was the Goat Riders, and this episode is He Who Rides the Goat. It's all about this Harpocrates character being a sign of secrecy and initiation. Maybe that's all this whole goat riding thing boils down to when you get into like the kernel of the nugget of it. But I'm glad that I was able to shed a little bit of light onto this 47th, the 47th problem of Euclid, because I do know that there's some confusion around about it. And I actually learned something this evening when I was doing my reading about the circumambulation around the lodge is what flashes, what does the gang flash of these numbers about. So again, the reading I did tonight, most of it was Freemasons-Freemasonry.com /Euclid_unveiled.html. It has I've skipped a ton of information. If you guys are interested, on this Pythagorean theory, this 47th problem of Euclid. Get on it. If you want to just get a glimpse of Harpocrates, you could Google search Harpocrates. And even though the Masonic dictionary says that he rides a goat or he rides a ram that balances a ball on its head, a lot of the ancient statuaries and stuff of him don't have. Sometimes he's riding a goose, sometimes a camel, sometimes a horse. I think in just the first couple pages of his search, there might be a goat or a ram or two. But I think that the Masons just latched onto this goat idea. But it seems like a lot of times he's just standing around. So, I mean, I don't know. But, you know, since it is Freemasonic February, I thought I would go with the Masonic version of that. So, there you go. Let's close some of this shit out. Let's get the fuck out of here, man. Give you guys I feel it's been a great episode. I'm worked up. My heart's pumping. We're ready to go. I feel like we got some great information. And I also got a great band to close you out. Before I go, I just want to say, hey, if you guys like the show or whatever, please consider leaving a rate and review on iTunes. Please subscribe to iTunes or Stitcher or wherever you get your podcasts from. Hit me up on social media. Remember, www.stigmatastudios.com. If you go to the comics page, that's the best way to support the show because it helps me pay for shit.
Vienna, 1683. Today is September 11th, 1683. The mighty army of the Ottoman Empire, led by the savage and radical terror troops of the Dar al-Harb, surround the walled city of Vienna and begin a siege to break the golden apple of Europe and kill, enslave, or convert all of its inhabitants. The valiant citizens stand against the tyrannical army with the steadfast leadership of Count Ernst Rudiger von Stromberg, the help of the ever-living rebel Cyrus, the Dead Guy, and the hopes of the faraway King Jan Sobieski III and his army of flying hussars. The Vienna 1683 comic is available right now from Stigmata Studios at stigmatastudios.com and on indieplanet.us. The Non-Standard Squad, 1944. World War II. 3 weird American soldiers are on a search and rescue mission into the oldest and darkest regions of Europe. A cursed ever-living warrior, Cyrus the Dead Guy. An experimental warbot, Sergeant Lane McCord. An all-red axe, mysterious rogue with a demon-possessed arm come face to face with an army of magically corrupted machine-obsessed elves, a magic hammer-wielding Norse Ubermensch, and a Nazi wizard who is a member of the ancient Dark Order of the Shining Hexagon. The Non-Standard Squad 1944 comic is available right now from Stigmata Studios at stigmatastudios.com and on indieplanet.us.
And I'm John Tower. I'm not beating you guys over the head. Do whatever you want. I found this great band called Frown. They're from Australia, and they do this great song called Harpocrates Unborn. And I just thought I'd play this on the way out. And thank you guys again. Remember, Stigmata Studios. Remember, rate and review. Spread the word. Spread the disease. Trying to get the numbers out there, bros. Let's go. Let's go. We'll get some initiations going here pretty soon. I promise. I swear to God, I promise. Next, maybe. Right after this. All right. Frown. Harpocrates Unborn. Here we go.